Hey guys, veteran outdoorsman here. Ooh, pardon my dirty hands. I've been working my truck all day. Getting ready for my getting ready for my out of state hunt. Um, Sorry, my brain's fried. I've been working on my truck, but there's been something brought up, uh, and it was touched on a hunter podcast, and I think I'm going to put a link to that on in the description here. Um, Deer hunters as a whole are very divided on a lot of things. And it's always been that way, and it will probably always be that way. Um, but we do need to understand where the other people are coming from. And I think that Hunter Podcast did a pretty good job of explaining that. They've got some views that I don't agree with. I'm sure I've got some views they don't agree with. Um, they have John Eberhard on there. I think they've had him on at least twice, and they have him on there sometimes. And he's one of those guys that you kind of got to swallow with a grain of salt. There's just a lot of things that I think. Um, I mean, there's a lot of things that some people agree with and some won't. I get that. I think most of us are that way. But there's a lot of things that he believes that I'm really not sure he's not the only person on earth that believes them. Um, I could be wrong, but there's scientific evidence that uh, scent products and scent lock suits and things like that don't work, but he swears by them and says that he doesn't hunt the wind and things like that. And I believe that he doesn't hunt the wind. I do believe that. To believe that he never gets busted because he doesn't hunt the wind, I I have trouble with that. Um, but we've all got things that we do that we believe and whatnot that other guys don't agree with. And to simply say that because a deer came downwind, they didn't smell you, um, that's not true. I have deer come in downwind all the time, and you can tell that they smell me, but sometimes they care and sometimes they don't. Especially with an immature deer, that they get a whiff and they're like, yeah, and just move on. Sometimes they blow and snort and ruin the whole area. But you know what? That's his personal thing. He uses scent lock suits. If he wants to spend the money on them and all of that, that's fine. Uh, and he brought up a personal belief that the guys that hunt solely on public land and consistently kill nice bucks on public land are definitively better hunters than those that hunt on managed properties and take big deer off of those properties. And it caused a lot of stink. That's why the last Hunter podcast was specifically dealing with that. And then the guy said, hey, we don't agree with this. We're not. And people were upset at them, and they don't have any control over what people say. Sure, they could have edited it out, but then what's the point of doing the podcast if you're going to pick and choose what you show that other people say? Now, if somebody said something that, about a practice that was illegal or something like that, you may not want to spread that. But he was just sharing his opinion, and they shared his opinion. I don't have any issue with that. But it brings up an interesting point. That being that there are so many groups of people out there that think they're better than others, or they're better hunters than others because of this, because of that. And I have fallen into that. Don't get me wrong. I've even said on here, that I think that a guy that solely hunts on public land is a better hunter than somebody that hunts on managed properties. But you have to really clarify that. And here's the thing. The guy that hunts on multiple, or the guy that hunts on large chunks of private ground that's managed for big deer, where did he get his hunting skills from? Think about that. Did he start out hunting small tracts of private ground and on public ground like the majority of us did? He's probably just as good a hunter as you. He's just fortunate enough to have some property, and he manages it for what he loves, which is deer hunting. Nobody can fault anybody for that. There may be a guy that grew up hunting a piece of family property, a couple thousand acres, and it's highly managed. Does that make him a bad hunter or lesser of a hunter than someone that only hunts private ground or only hunts public ground? Not necessarily. If the guy is doing his homework and going out on these properties and finding where the deer are and consistently killing them, can the deer on these managed properties be somewhat easier to hunt? They can be, but every property is an individual. Every person is an individual. Every deer is an individual. I'll put my hunting background, what I've done, where I came from, how I grew up hunting. I'll put that out there. And most of you that follow my channel know this, but it'll give you a perspective of where I'm coming from. I grew up, my dad deer hunted. He would hunt on family and friends' property here in Missouri when we came home during deer season and whatnot. But where we lived, he was in the Navy, and he would hunt on military bases near where we lived. For all intents and purposes, that's public land with a twist. On the East Coast, and in the Southeast, there's a lot of public lands that's limited entry, and you have to put in for permits, or some of it's, first come, first serve, and things like that. And this property was more like that. It was limited entry, divided into zones. Only so many people could hunt that zone. You put in for it, like in the spring or during the summer. You got drawn for one of three picks for the zones for different days, and you put in, you could decide, hey, I want to hunt zone 14 next week, and if it was open, you could hunt it. It was kind of like club hunting, but there was still a lot of pressure. Just because that piece of property didn't have anybody hunting it that day, which was possible, didn't mean that it didn't have three guys hunting exactly where you wanted to be the day before, and things like that. And that was where I got my first taste of deer hunting, was on properties like that. And then we moved here to Missouri. My family, my grandfather had farm. My uncle has it now. My grandfather had farm. My other grandpa had a small farm, like 10 or 11 acres, and I did hunt it as well. But my one grandfather owned a few hundred acres, not in one continuous tract. He owned several hundred acres, though, and a couple hundred right near the house, butted up against some of my uncle's property. and now he owns the big chunk, and the stuff that didn't attach has all been sold off years ago. Um, but honestly, that piece of property got a lot of pressure. A lot of guys would hunt there opening day. A lot of guys hunted the surrounding areas. There was no management to speak of. If it was a legal deer, it was shot. Um, and there was years that nobody on that property saw a deer. Wasn't the best property. The deer numbers were low. Um, and my dad had some a friend that had some property, and we would hunt with him. Uh, Another one of my uncles had some property, and I would hunt that. But it was all kind of the same scenario, you know. If it's brown, it's down. Um, Heavy pressure all around it. Nobody really hunted for big bucks, though a few were taken here and there. Um, you had to back in those days. You had to put in for doe tags. Your deer tag was good for $1 statewide. And I think at one point there was even a county or two that it wasn't okay. That you couldn't even hunt in, but I could be wrong there. I know that there was a county or two for a long time that you couldn't even put in for doe tags. But you could put in for an any deer tag in all counties, but there was a limited quota on those. Um, and it wasn't necessarily easy to get drawn. And then some counties had one or two bonus antlerless tags that you could also put in for, but that was even harder to get drawn for. So I hunted the majority of my hunting the first several years bucks only, hunting pressured pieces of land. I started hunting public land when I was in high school, I would say. Um, Bow hunting and also some gun hunting. Um, yeah, I was in high school, my senior year. I think I started bow hunting public land a little bit before that, but and it was, I mean, so I started, and it was the mentality: if it's brown, it's down. It had to have 3-inch spikes to be illegal, and if a 3-inch spike walked past somebody, 9 times out of 10, it got a bullet hole in it, or at least got shot at. Um, that's just the way things were back then. I'm 41 years old, and you're talking 25 plus years ago, and that's, I mean, that's the way it was for a long time. A lot of guys still feel that way. That's up to them. Um, I'm not quite that point anymore, but I'm not real far from it either. Depending on how full my freezer is and whatnot, really depends on what I shoot. I will sometimes be picky if I've got a deer or two, but not always. But that's fine. It's your tag. It's your decision. You do what you want as long as it's legal. And if you don't like that and you don't like the laws, then lobby to get them changed. Sure, you're going to make some enemies along the way. You're going to make enemies just by having your viewpoint of you should shoot mature deer. You're going to make enemies by having your viewpoint of shooting a 3-inch spike's okay. It If it's that important to you and you think it makes that big of a difference on the deer herd, then contact your conservation department. Go to the public forums and things that different states have, and emails and whatever it takes, and try to get it changed. But that's where I came from. Um, and The seventh season that I deer hunted, I finally killed my first deer. Um, it was a young doe, about 65 pounds, field dress, and I was elated. Didn't kill anything the next year. The next year, I killed a doe fawn and two button bucks. One with my bow, two with my rifle, and I was just ecstatic. And then the next year I killed like a 90-pound doe. The next year I killed a horse of a doe. And you also got to think a lot of these I'm shooting the first thing I see, and I've only got one tag, an any deer tag. When it finally got to where you could get statewide any deer tags, that's the only tag I've got in my pocket because most of the counties don't allow bonus tags at this time. Now they do, but back then, um, and I'm still shooting the first legal deer I see, and generally it's a doe. Sometimes it's a button buck. Uh, when I got into some places to where you could kill bonus deer, sure, and fill those bonus tags with whatever's legal. I did that a lot, and I think most of us start out that way. As I got a little older, I became a little better hunter, and I I started killing deer more consistently, getting to where I would shoot deer every year, but I wasn't very picky. In the beginning, you go 2, 3 years without killing one, and then you finally kill a doe. I mean, that's just the way it was back then. There wasn't as many deer. The regulations weren't as liberal as they are, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't as good of a hunter as I am now. Have I arrived? Am I the best hunter? Nowhere close. But I'm the best hunter I've ever been. And I think everyone should look at yourselves and be able to say, I'm the best hunter that I have ever been at this point. There's always some growth. There's always room to grow. And you'll never arrive like being the best Christian or being the best baseball player or being best football player. You can only really compare to yourself because everybody's situation is different. The way everybody grew up is different. Their training is different. Their learning processes are different. I train people at work. I know all about the learning process thing. Some people I can tell them what to do and they can do it the next 100 times perfectly. Some people I can tell them what to do 100 different times and they never get it right. And then finally one day it clicks. Some people it never clicks and they have to ask every single time. Deer hunters are no different. Some people I do believe have this natural ability to just walk into a place, find sign, look at the terrain, figure out where to sit, and kill deer. I believe Dan Infalt is one of those guys. I think Greg from the Hunting Public is one of those guys. I think Aaron is one of those guys. I think if Zach allowed himself, he would be one of those guys. But I think he second guesses himself too much. This is personal opinion. And I think Ted and not sure why I can't think of the other guy's name. Anyway, I think they're really good. They've got a lot of ability, and they may have that natural ability. They just haven't honed it quite as well as the other older guys, and that makes sense. Um, that's the way it goes. Some guys have that natural ability. Some guys really have to study it and work at it to be able to kill deer. But some of those guys are just as good at doing it as the guys that have the natural ability. It's no different than when you're in school. You've got one guy in your class that studies his hind end off in math class and gets straight A's in that class, aces all the tests, gets all the homework right and everything. Then you've got the kid that comes in, sits down, turns in his half-done paperwork, his half-done homework, sleeps most of the way through class, and gets C's because he passes all his tests. You know, not with great grades, but passes. He's got a natural ability to pick up what little he hears, and he pays just enough attention to pass. Who's smarter? It could be argued that the one guy's smarter because he gets straight A's. It could be argued that the other guy's smarter because he passes without trying. Who's the better student? Well, the one guy absorbs without taking notes or anything, doesn't pay a whole lot of attention, and absorbs enough to pass. You can't say he's a bad student. The other guy really has to try, but he's getting A's. Same thing with deer hunting. Exact same thing. I can go on to a property and I'm pretty confident that I can pick a piece of ground, public or private, and I can find deer in a short period of time. I am going to leave the end of this week to go on a hunt in Arkansas. I'll be hunting for 5 days. Hopefully I'll be able to scout the day before, but man, stuff going on right now, I'm not sure. And I'm going to hunt. I can kill one buck and one doe. How picky am I going to be? Well, it's out of state. I've never been there. I don't know. I'm going to shoot the first decent legal doe that I see. The first decent doe that I see. And that I can promise you. I'm going to shoot any pig that I see. That I can promise you. As far as bucks, I'm going to have to judge that when I get there. If I'm seeing a lot of buck sign, I'm seeing some nice bucks, I may not shoot a young one. I'm only there 5 days too, so I'm not sure. But if I go down there and I shoot a fork horn on the first day and I kill a doe and maybe a hog, some guys will say, man, you're a really great hunter. And some guys say, you're a slob. Why would you do that? Why would you shoot that little buck and that 60-pound doe and that 50-pound shote pig? You need to be more picky. And to them, I say, you didn't buy my tag. I've got limited time. I hunt for food. I do. I hunt for food. My family, majority of what we eat year round is deer meat. Every deer I shoot, save the back straps and the tenderloins, the rest gets ground up. Every deer I shoot. And we eat that ground meat all year long. If you have hamburger helper in my house, it's got deer in it. You have spaghetti or lasagna, it's got deer in it. If I grill you some burgers, it's deer. And I greatly appreciate every time I harvest a deer, whether it's a young doe or a mature 8-10 point buck. I greatly appreciate that because it means a lot of me to have that, meat for my family. That's the way I grew up. Not everyone's that way. I get that. Once I've got 2 or 3 deer on the ground, I don't hunt anymore, as a general rule. Occasionally, if I've got a friend that wants a deer or something like that, I'll go and try to get them one. But I've been burned by that, and I didn't have room in my freezer, and I shoot one for somebody, and then they say, oh, no, I don't want it now. So I don't tend to do that anymore. Once my freezer's full, I quit. A lot of guys will give them to programs like here in Missouri, we've got Share to Harvest. In other states, they've got Hunters for the Hungry, things like that, where you can take it to a processor, get the meat donated. Um, and that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. That's not me. I hunt to fill my freezer. Sometimes it's a mature buck. Sometimes it's a couple of slick heads. Whatever it is. I always look back at those hard times when I didn't really know what I was doing and there wasn't a lot of deer in the woods. Uh, and I really appreciate every deer I kill. Um, it's been several years since I've killed a small buck. And I have passed up it. I probably hunted for 20 years before I ever passed a deer up that I knew I could kill. I'd pass shots because I just wasn't sure I could make the shot. And we all should do that. But to pass up a deer that I knew I could make the shot, um, I'm sure I hunted over 20 years before that ever happened. Last year I passed up. Trying to think. I passed up a fork horn opening morning, a half rack fork horn, and one side broken off, just a little nub sticking up, and then had fork on the other side. Passed up a doe that I could have killed, and if she had stopped, I probably would have shot her. I just decided that early in the morning, opening day, I didn't want to shoot a walking deer, so I was waiting for her to stop, and she never did. And I didn't try to stop her. Figured I had all day to hunt. Then, as I was dragging my deer out, I had a few deer come by that I could have killed. Fact is, I had one little deer come by, and it was a spike, but I mean they were only about that long, so it would have been legal on an antlerless tag. I didn't want to shoot him anyway, um, but just to see, I'd already unloaded my gun, took my gun off my back, loaded it, and then raised up the rifle. I could have killed him, um, but I didn't. I'll let him go. I do pass up deer. If you don't, that's fine. Some of us have problems with that. Some don't. It- Guys will say, well, those guys that hunt with crossbows, they're just lazy slobs. Again, you got to look at why. Most people don't have a problem with somebody with an injury, such as my bad shoulder, hunting with a crossbow, or a young child, or an older person. Um, some do. I'm not really sure why. But again, it's legal. It gets people out in the woods. I hunt with a compound. I hunt with a recurve, and I hunt with a crossbow. Um, and it really kind of depends on my mood of the day, where I'm going to hunt, all that. It's legal. I hunt with it. I hunt with rifles. A lot of guys, well, I'm a purist. I bow hunt during gun season. Good for you. That doesn't make you a better hunter than me. Maybe you are, but that doesn't make you a better hunter than me. That makes you more selective. You have to get closer shots. That makes you more disciplined, maybe. Again, I'm out there to fill my freezer, so when gun season rolls around, I'm going to hunt with my rifle. Now, I do, as I've become a better hunter, and I'm more confident in my abilities, I do sometimes take a handgun instead of a rifle. I took a shotgun with slugs a couple of years ago because I'd never killed a deer with a shotgun with slugs. I wanted to do it. I sat open in the morning, I shot a 7-pointer, and went back to the truck. Not much different than rifle hunting when you're not going to get a shot past 50 yards. This year I'm going to hunt with a lever action 30-30 with a long eye relief scope on it. That's going to be my gun during firearms season. I'm going to hunt in Arkansas with a muzzleloader because they've got an early muzzleloader season. And I'm looking forward to it. I hunt with everything. Some guys bow hunt all year long. Guys complain that gun season's a darn rut, and we can argue that and blah, blah, blah. My personal feeling is that by evidence, by what I see, gun season in Missouri is actually at the tail end of the rut. Most people will tell you that it's at the prime rut. Here's the thing. In areas with high doe populations, which I hunt in places with high doe populations, the majority of the chasing and cruising is at the very beginning of the rut and at the very end. And I see a lot of chasing and cruising during firearms season, which makes me feel that it's toward the end of the rut and not in prime rut. And that may just be the areas I hunt. I'm not going to argue with guys, but they don't like that. They don't like that you can kill 2 bucks in Missouri. Well, it used to be 3. It got better. You're never going to please everybody. A lot of guys would be happy with a 1 deer limit and a 2-month long firearms season to fill that tag and no other hunting. If you wanted to hunt with a bow, fine. You want to hunt with a muzzleloader, fine. But just a 2-month long season and you can kill 1 deer. A lot of guys would be happy with that. I've had guys say that Missouri's gun season's too long. It's 11 days. It's the shortest season of any state I've hunted, but Illinois has shorter season, and they have a split season. But they have some extra antlerless seasons. They've got 2 muzzleloader seasons, 2 gun seasons. It is split up, but still, it's not a lot of days and whatnot. And well, if you have to kill a deer during gun season, then you're not a good hunter. Well, how many days do you have to hunt? You realize that the average guy probably has less than, and this is a guy that bow hunts and gun hunts, has less than 10 days in the woods every year. Between, the kids got football practice and football games. Kids have band practice. He's got a job. He works 60 hours a week. He's got things he does at church. He's got to hang out with the wife from time to time. Not a lot of time. Guys here in Missouri that only gun hunt, which is the majority of hunters I think, in all states. You work a full-time job. Maybe you don't get much vacation or you don't get any of whatever. You've got 4 days to hunt, 2 weekends. And then you can muzzleloader hunt. That gives you another 2 weekends. You can antlers hunt. That gives you another 2 weekends. And that's it. What's that, 8 days? That's if you hunt every available day. And most guys aren't able to do that. So when that guy that's got 5 or 6 days to hunt in a year drops a fork horn on the second to last day of season because that's the only deer he's seen, does it make him a bad hunter? Does it make him unethical? No. Everybody's situation's different. The Hunter Podcast did a really good job of talking about that. And I even brought up, some guys just enjoy killing stuff. And hey, been there. A 7-year-old kid gets his first Road Rider BB gun and nothing's safe. And some guys never outgrow that. I enjoy deer hunting. I appreciate harvesting deer. I do get a thrill when I kill a deer. But you do have to realize you took a life. And it doesn't matter if it's a squirrel or a dove or a duck or whatever, you took a life. And you need to respect that life. And it's going to bring food to your family or to another family. And it's going to bring decoration to your house with the antlers or the hides or whatever. Or maybe you're going to wear some of it, clothing. And you need to respect that animal. Some people don't. Those guys are slobs. Those guys, they may be a good hunter, but they're not hunters in my book. If you disagree with that, that's fine. But everybody's got different reasons to hunt. Some people just hunt for meat. They truly just enjoy being out there and putting some meat on the table for their family. And I'm mostly into that category. I mean, I think that the white-tailed deer is one of the best eating animals in the world. I like it better than beef. It's right up there with pork, but it's probably kind of a draw there. I greatly enjoy it, and I really appreciate it when I kill a deer. A lot of guys, they hunt, they put the antlers on the wall, they eat the meat, but they don't particularly enjoy it. Everybody's got different reasons to hunt. I know guys that refuse to shoot does, even in areas where it's recommended you take does out of the population because they don't particularly care for deer meat and they like to have antlers on the wall. I don't understand that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's legal. I'm not going to argue with them. If they ask me my opinion, I'll tell them. I'm not going to force it down their throat. Everybody's got their own opinions. These guys on Hunter's Podcast, they're big on the shooting mature bucks, keeping an older age class of deer. The one guy allows his kids to shoot whatever they want to shoot. I think that's the way it should be. They're already starting to get picky though. Don't want to shoot button bucks and things like that, and that's fine. You shouldn't force a kid to shoot something, but if they want to, let them. But they get a lot of enjoyment out of managing the properties they hunt and shooting mature deer. And if the season ends and they didn't take a mature deer, they're okay with that. Now, if my season ends and I don't kill a mature deer, I could care less. If I don't kill a deer, I'm pretty bummed because I don't have deer meat to eat for the rest of the year. And that's a problem. And the guys will say, well, just shoot a doe. And that sounds really easy. But how much time do you have to hunt? Where are you hunting? Where are your skills as a hunter? And I said, well, get better. I think we all strive to get better, but we got to start somewhere. I'm telling you, 25 years ago here in Missouri, shooting an 8-point with a 12-inch spread was just as difficult as shooting a 5.5-year-old 10-pointer is today. And that's a fact. In the places I hunt here in Missouri. Because there wasn't as many of them. People didn't manage properties. There wasn't as many deer as a whole. And it was a big deal. My first nice buck didn't break 100 inches. 17-inch spread, real short tines, thin horns, big bodied deer, older deer. If you use tooth wear as an indicator, older deer. I don't know how old he was. I don't care. The old gray coat, big bodied deer. Not much for headgear though. But I had so many people tell me, you need to hang him on the wall. You need to hang him because it was just getting into that period of time where, people were starting to care about it, but the deer populations hadn't grown to where they are now and whatnot. I killed a 2.5-year-old 2 years after that absolutely blew him away antler wise. Nowhere near the body on him, but absolutely blew him away antler wise. I'm talking by like 20 inches. And I worked for that deer. I'd like to say I worked for every deer I've ever killed, but that's not 100% true. There's been times when I walked back to deer camp and there was a deer standing in the pasture and I shot it. That was legal at our deer camp. Some deer camps have regulations against that. They say, no, we don't want them to shoot around the camp or whatever because they like seeing them. That's fine. Where we were, as long as you were outside the house, you were fine. Well, as long as the muzzle was outside of the house. No, as long as you were outside of the house, you're fine. And a lot of guys would step out on the porch to shoot deer while we were eating lunch or whatever. It happened. Wasn't really hunting. As I look at that now, it really wasn't. You just lucked upon them. But how many of you have shot deer while you were walking back to your truck? It's getting 9, 10 o'clock. You're going to go back to camp, get something to eat, come back in the evening. You're walking back to your truck and you just happen upon one and shoot it. Was it really hunting? Not really. It wasn't the deer you were looking for necessarily. You just stumbled upon it. You didn't scout to find it or anything, but you happened to walk upon one and shoot it. But yes, it was hunting because you were out in the woods, you had a gun with you, you were there to shoot a deer. Was it the same as picking your spot and shooting him when he came by? No. Does it make you a bad hunter or an unethical hunter because you shot one on the way back to the truck? No. Again, that's my opinion. A lot of guys are going to disagree with me. Then there's a guy that's killed several mature deer. But from year to year, his goals change. One year, he just wants to put a deer in the freezer. And he shoots a 6-pointer, 1.5-year-old buck. Puts it in the freezer. The next year, he decides he wants to shoot a mature buck. And he holds out and doesn't kill anything. Maybe shoots a doe later on in the season. And then the next year he decides, I didn't kill anything last year. Anything over 115 inches, I'm going to shoot it. And he does. Next year, I'm going to shoot a mature deer. And he does. Next year, I'm just going to shoot the first thing walks by. And he does. But maybe from year to year, he didn't have as many days to hunt. Maybe he lost his deer lease or whatever. There's so many things that affect a guy's deer season and affect the way they can hunt, how they can hunt, where they can hunt. If you've hunted the same piece of property, private ground, You've had permission. Maybe it's a family farm. Maybe it's a friend of a family or whatever. Um, Maybe you were on a lease and you've killed some really nice deer on that property, and then all of a sudden you don't have that property anymore, and you're down to hunt public land. Are your standards going to change? To some guys, they won't. To some guys, assuredly they will. If you're hunting, you hunt Iowa, you get to hunt it every 5, 6 years, whatever the case may be, and your goal there is to shoot 140 or better buck, and you do most of the times you go up there. But you also hunt Florida, and your goal there is just to shoot, you know, something with more than 6 points. Or you hunt northern Missouri, and your goal is a 4.5-year-old buck, preferably over 120 inches. But then you hunt down by the boot heel, and you go there with that goal in mind, you might not see one. So I think it's okay to change your goals according to where you hunt. Some guys are okay with that, some aren't. But they have to be there. If they're not there, all you're doing is sitting in the woods. Can you do things to improve the property and make it attractive to deer that size? But there are some areas that are just never going to grow a 150-inch buck. There's some areas where that deer's only a 3-year-old, and guys are going to frown on you shooting him. Every hunter is individual. Every piece of ground is individual. Every deer is an individual. I have hunted in places where a spike may be 5 years old. Guys that want to shoot mature age class deer would certainly say that deer needs to come out of the herd, but most of them aren't going to shoot that deer. And that's fine. I have hunted in places where if a 1.5-year-old buck doesn't have at least 8 points, he's probably a cull. He needs to come out of the herd. And I've hunted a little bit of everything in between. I'm going to change my goals from where I hunt from year to year. And if you don't like that, it's fine. You're not buying my deer tag. I'm doing what's legal. If the laws change, I may not be happy about it, but I'll follow them. They came out tomorrow and said that a buck in the state of Missouri has to have a minimum of a 14-inch spread, has to have at least 4 points on one side, which is a good portion of Missouri anyway, the 14 points. Would I like it? Would I agree with it? Maybe not. Would I follow the rules? Sure. Now there's guys that won't, and they're just still going to shoot whatever they want, and they're just going to take it back to the house and skin it and act like it was legal. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to follow the laws. Crossbows were legalized a few years ago. Guys say that, but just it's slob hunters, and it's not as it's not bow hunting, and I can see that, but it's certainly not as easy as hunting with a rifle either. You still have to judge your distance, get relatively close, watch for obstructions, things like that. It's a good way to get people out in the woods. If I'm going into a piece of property and I don't know where I'm going to sit, I know there's a good chance I'm going to end up on the ground. A lot of times I'm going to take my crossbow. Sometimes I'll take it just because that's what I want to hunt with. No different than picking my 30-06 versus my handgun versus my muzzleloader. Quit picking at people. Giving your buddies trouble, no big deal. But instead of, and this is what the Hunter Podcast was trying to do, instead of just railing on people for how they believe and what they think is right, try to understand it. Try to see where they're coming from. And if you listen to why they do it, it may be because they're inexperienced or immature. You were there at one point. It may be because they've got limited resources as far as where they can hunt, or limited time. Maybe because they're just out there to put meat in their freezer and they don't have a lot of days to do it. But I think if we would just listen to other hunters and to why they do what they do, I think most of the time we would understand it and not have a problem with it anymore. So guys, this has been interesting. I think it's a good topic. I'm going to try to tag Hunter Podcast, and I'm going to put a link to their podcast in the description. It's definitely worth the watch. Be fair warned. Unlike me, they do use some language you may not like. I'm just letting you know that. But they had a lot of good things to say. And I don't always agree with everything they say. But I continue to listen because I'm learning their perspective. And I'm slowly beginning to realize that they're not the elitists that they came out to be. That they came off as when I first started watching. They're guys out there, they've got their own goals, and they really want to understand why other people have their goals. So God bless you. We'll see you next time. Hopefully the next time I'm on, I'm talking about a big buck I killed in Arkansas. Have a good one.